Welcome back to Your Future Self. In today's episode, I'm joined by the legendary Dr. Gay Hendricks, therapist, professor, and author of more than 40 books, including the classics The Big Leap and Conscious Living. Gay has spent decades guiding people to unlock their potential, heal old patterns, and step into a life filled with love, creativity, and presence. In our conversation, you'll discover what it really means to come home to yourself, how healing opens the door to your true potential, and the 5 cardinal rules of conscious living. Powerful practices that can help you stop living on autopilot and start creating your life with intention. I hope you enjoy. Gay Hendricks!
Good morning, afternoon, whatever it is, where in the world you are.
Just turned afternoon. My name is Katarina Nordqvist. I realize that we don't have our names here, but I go by Kat as well.
Kat, and where in the world are you today?
I'm in Montclair, New Jersey. Where are you today?
I'm in Ojai, California.
Oh, hi. Very nice. It's such an honor and a privilege to have you on Your Future Self. I realize that I know a lot about you and you know nothing about me. So I just recently started this podcast, and ever since I was a little kid, I knew that I was here to help people feel more connected and more seen. I didn't know how, but I knew that was my life's work. And it's so funny because before coming on today, I had this grand idea that we were going to talk about The Big Leap because that book has changed and transformed so many lives, and Upper Limits and Genius Zone. And of course, as life would have it, I got my hands on Conscious Living.
Oh,
And I started reading it, and I learned about your childhood and everything that I believe is how do we help people come home to themselves and how do we live conscious lives. So, if it's all right with you, we'll go in that direction today, talk about the 5 cardinal rules and all of the brilliance in this book and whatever else you want to share.
be delighted to. I'm always
Yeah.
happy to talk about that.
Okay, beautiful. Honestly, Gay, as I was reading and I was learning about your childhood, and I love to know, you're a brilliant author, you've written many books, you have helped thousands and thousands of clients and individuals around the world. I always like to understand who was Dr. Gay Hendricks, who was Gay Hendricks before Dr. Gay Hendricks, really. And so I was learning a lot about your childhood, and it resonated so deeply, and there were so many parallels for myself. But can you tell me a little bit about little Gay?
Oh, sure. I was born at a very awkward time, and that is that my mother had my older brother who was 7, and then shortly after she got pregnant with me, my father died suddenly at age 32 years old. And so everything got thrown upside down. I didn't know this yet. I was still waiting to enter the stage. But, um, my mother went from happy housewife to widow with $300 in the bank. And, my father didn't provide for her very well. And at age 32, most of us aren't thinking that we're going to die today. So anyway, she got really thrown out of the nest and had to go to work right away as a bookkeeper, which she hated, but she could do it. She wanted to be a writer. And so in my early days, I was mostly looked after by my grandmother, and who was a fabulously wonderful woman, and I wouldn't be here without her. Rebecca Del Canaday was her name. And by the way, Kat is also a very dear name to me, Katerina, because my beloved Aunt Kat lived next door to me growing up, and was a great friend and playmate of mine. She was always ready
Oh,
for a game. And so I grew up in a Southern family where, in my particular case, uh, you don't see this much anymore, but everybody in my family pretty much lived within a stone's throw of each other. My grandparents occupied a big house here, and then my aunt and uncle had the one 100 feet away over here, and then we lived 100 feet over here, and then my other aunt and uncle lived 200 feet down, down the block. And so it was an enclave of a lot of people who were related to me, which the downside of it was I couldn't get away with anything, no matter what, there was always somebody that could tell on me. And but on the positive side, I got a lot of positive reinforcement because I was the new kid in town, and my aunt and uncle didn't have any kids, and my other aunt and uncle didn't have any kids. So wherever I went, I was kind of the golden boy. And so that I came in also with a medical problem that would later provide a big influence on my life. And that is due to my mother's stresses, having been recently widowed, there's a hormone that is produced um, during pregnancy, and hers didn't produce. And so I was born with this a thyroid and pituitary problem, which made me gain weight very fast. And so by the end of my first year of life, I was one of those super fat babies with rolls of baby fat. And then I was a fat
They're
toddler
really
and
the
a fat
cutest, though. The cutest
yeah.
babies.
They're cute. Yeah, but not so cute when they get 12, 13.
I know.
But anyway, this led to a big um, being experienced as a medical problem because I was taken around to different experts and I was put on different diets. And finally, when I was 14 years old, I went to the uber super specialist paid for by my aunt and uncle who were wealthy. And so he put me on this really rigorous diet and also prescribed a set of pills to me, one of which, they called them diet pills in the time, but they were amphetamines basically. So in the ninth grade, I went from being a mediocre student to taking the amphetamines. I made straight A's across the board because I couldn't sleep at night. I could study till 12:30 at night. And so whether it's a good thing to put 14-year-olds on amphetamines or not, we'll have to do another discussion. But anyway, during that year, I lost a lot of weight. And but of course, when I quit taking the pills, the weight started to come back on. But I finally, at age 24, I had a big enlightenment experience, and I was able to see down through the levels of myself, and I could see where my obesity came from, even at a cellular level. And then, as if by magic, science discovered how to treat the thing. I was way up in my 20s when they finally discovered how to treat this problem. And so but I ended up kind of doing it the old-fashioned way, which was with a big life change. I had this moment when I was 24, when I I was fat and I wore big thick glasses and I smoked 2 or 3 packs of Marlboros a day, and I slipped on the ice. I was walking in New England and on a country road, and I slipped and I went down like a whoomp. And I didn't knock myself out, but I knocked myself out of my way of seeing myself. And for about 2 minutes, I could feel and see myself as I actually was, not through the filter of my illusions and my thinking and my history and all of that, but I could see that I had these old emotions that had never been expressed, old anger, old sadness, old fear, and I'd been carrying them around ever since I was a kid. But the real magic of it was that in that experience, I also could feel and see what was behind and beyond all of those emotions that had gotten triggered by different events in my life. But even if they'd been triggered by other events, back beyond that was this thing that I call pure consciousness, pure awareness, which was the backdrop of all of these things I was feeling in my body during that 2 minute period. And after a few minutes, it kind of began to wear off. But I made this vow while I was kind of in the deep experience. I made a vow. I said, I'm going to do whatever it takes to feel that all the time. And at the time, I didn't know anything about meditation or anything like that, or I hadn't taken any psychedelics or done any meditation retreats or anything, which I would later do. But at that time, that was all just purely experienced in my body. But it changed my life because
Mhm.
I started eating differently, for example, to feed that new consciousness in my body.
Mhm.
And I lost 100 pounds
It's
within a year.
it's incredible, and I know it's so hard to sum up your entire childhood existence and young adult existence in a short amount of time. What struck me was the moment that you had where you, I don't know if you call it met spirit or you were one with consciousness again, but I do recall when you were going into elementary school, you asked a question. And I think maybe you had just come from church or Sunday school, or there was something going on, and you asked, "Am I the son of God too?"
Yes.
Do
Well,
you do you remember this?
oh, I do. I
Okay.
remember right after it too, because I grew up, my mother was not particularly religious. We went to the Methodist church, but she was by no mean a believer or anything like that. And she could probably just as easily gone to the Episcopal church or the Presbyterian church in this little town of Leesburg, Florida. And so she wasn't particularly religious, and my brother certainly wasn't, and my grandfather wasn't. My grandmother was quite religious, and so she would take me to vacation Bible school. And I had just come back from vacation Bible school where they were talking about Jesus being the Son of God. And I remember not talking to my grandmother about it, but wondering about it because I sort of knew my grandmother would, have something orthodox to say about it. But I sort of started thinking, wait a minute, if one person was the Son of God, why can't all of us be the Son of God? Am I the Son of God too? And, that made a big impression on me because I realized, as far as I could see, that was the truth of the matter. You didn't need to discuss it anymore. Everybody was holy or nobody was holy, And I remember putting this together. I was a pretty precocious kid, I guess, thinking about that kind of stuff when I was 5 or 6 years old. Um, yeah, I think I was six because I think it was the summer after I started the first grade when I went to this particular vacation Bible school. But that was a big thing. And I still, to this day, don't understand why we have to single out one person as divine as opposed to feeling everybody is divine. I mean, some people are good spokesmen for it or spokeswomen for it, but we all have the same spirit and we all have the same soul and we all have the same experience of either being contracted against that spirit or open to some degree in that spirit. And during those 2 minutes, I was just wide open. And I think it took a permanent snapshot in it to me because then later on in life, I just started doing things that made me feel that more and more and more. And I caught a good wave because at that time meditation was just beginning to catch on because Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was bringing TM out. And I had a fortuitous encounter with somebody that would later play a big role in my life. But one day, a friend of mine who had graduated from Harvard said, "You want to come to a lecture? My favorite Harvard professor has
Story.
come back from India and he's doing some weird new thing, but I want to go hear about it." So we went up and it happened to be on a big estate in New Hampshire that belonged to Richard Alpert's father. Richard Alpert had just come back from India and was now calling himself Ramdas. And unbeknownst, I had never been around, yogis or anything like that. And we came into this big estate, and there are all these young kids, maybe 10 or 15 of them. They're all maybe in their 20s and they're dressed in these flowing robes and everything. And they're his disciples. And then he comes out and he's got this big robe on and they're passing around bananas and apples. I remember thinking, what are these people selling? Because I didn't
this is
really
this is
explore
some cult thing.
some crazy cult thing. But anyway, we sat down and Ram Dass proceeded to talk for 3 hours about the most relevant stuff in life, the stuff you'd want them to talk about in high school or
Ooh,
college or graduate
yes.
school, but nobody ever does. And so he was talking about the raw stuff of life, feeling depressed or feeling elated or, all of these different things that just seem to be coming out of nowhere in him because he wasn't consulting any notes. And I was a teacher at the time at a school for delinquent boys. And I never went into a class without 3 pages of handwritten notes, detailed, and, a lesson plan and all of that. But here's Ram Dass. Where's he getting this stuff from? And he just occasionally he would look down at this picture of this grizzled old guy that I found later was his guru, and then he would smile and then he would kick into,
Yeah.
he would like catch another wave. So anyway, afterwards, I went up and asked him. I asked him a couple of things. I asked him, "Where do you get this stuff from? You're not using any notes." And he said, "Oh, it's just there. I just go and articulate it." What? Where is it?
Yeah. Tell me.
Yeah, tell me, where are these universal truths to be
Yeah.
found? And saying, go in there. They're all there. But I said, look at me. I'm overweight. Don't like my job. I don't like my relationship I'm in. And I'm, fat. And what would you recommend that I do? And he said, well, in India, in here, you might do some therapy. That would be good. But if you're in India, you'd probably learn a lot about breathing techniques and you'd do physical postures and you'd meditate. You'd learn to meditate. And you wouldn't, those things would all affect your weight, but you wouldn't have to be struggling with your weight all the time. In other words, what I got out of that was you can increase your life energy, and the increase in life energy will make you lose weight to get in harmony, to get your body in harmony with that. And I took the challenge, basically. I learned how to meditate and I started doing yoga postures. I found a little book. Actually, very shortly thereafter, I found a little book called Yoga, Youth, and Reincarnation. And it was just full of yoga practices and breathing and meditation. And even before I learned TM or anything I did later, I learned how to meditate out of that book and learn how to breathe out of that book. And later on, both those things would become incredibly important when I began to integrate them into a therapy practice.
What I love about you, Gay, and your story is that I feel like you had this deep curiosity and still have it, deep curiosity. And when you asked a question, you were sincerely open to receiving answers. And then what some may call miracles or the universe or divine stepped into your life. And I often feel like we are co-creating with the universe, whatever you want to call it. And when you ask, it is given, but maybe not in the way that you anticipate. Maybe not in a direct flash moment of here's your next step, here's exactly what you need to do. But somebody drops in your lap, like your friend, after you had this fall and you were like, I vow and pledge that I want to experience this feeling for the rest of my life. And then your friend says, hey, my favorite professor is coming back. Do you want to come?
Yeah.
And you said yes. Like, you know what? Now that I'm here with Ram Dass, I'm going to ask him what he would recommend. Breathing. You end up, I think, was it a grocery store or,
Yeah.
and then the book is just right there. But you had the awareness of catching it in that moment because it's so fleeting. You could have missed the book entirely. But
Yes, as a matter of fact, Ram Dass, I asked him specifically, where would I find out about stuff like that? And I remember this little gesture he made with his hand. He said, oh, you'll find it, like details, that it'll come to you. And that was the impression I got. And I left actually, frankly, feeling kind of puzzled. Did I really get anything out of this? But then in the grocery store, there's that book staring me in the face, that yoga book. And I mean, once you get a few little signals from the universe like that, it's hard to stay oblivious for long.
Right? And it just becomes, at least from my experience, it truly feels like you are supported and you are guided. Uh,
And I think that's the way it is. And I mean, how could the universe be set up any differently? See, once we get into harmony, just take breathing, for example. You mentioned breathing. I may be one of the few human beings that's written 3 different books about breathing.
let's talk about
So
it
I
'cause it's
thought about it
beautiful.
a lot. And, but you know what? What I did was I decided to go look at how healthy newborns breathe. What are they
Mm,
doing that my anxious graduate students are not doing with their breathing? And what the and the universe has a beautiful way of breathing that's just wired into us if we don't get traumatized.
mm,
And but if we get traumatized, then our breathing has to go around that somehow.
mm,
And how it goes around like a river goes around boulders, our life energy then has to kind of go around those tight shoulders or go around that ball in your stomach or go around those places where we really get glitched up.
mhm.
And so what you can do is either focus on the problem places to bash your head against the boulders and say, why can't I, or you can identify with the life energy, with the flow, and let that take you into places that need to be healed. And it will too, because, like I always tell I spent 21 years of my life as a professor at the University of Colorado in the counseling psychology department. So I trained a couple of generations of therapists, 1,200 of them, I think, if I remember correctly. And I used to, they would always ask me, how much should I do my own therapy while I'm, doing therapy
Mhm,
with people? And I always say, your students, your clients are going to show you where your glitches are.
mm.
Because I remember one time, 3 people in a row came in struggling with father issues. And I was beginning to wonder, I wonder
Mhm.
if that has something to do with me,
Yes.
And we around here joke about the rule of 3 because I always talk about once something has happened 3 or more times, you have a trend. If you have one thing happen, well, you might be just walking down the street the day the brick fell off the building. Big deal. If that happens twice, if another street you're walking on and somebody's umbrella sticks you in the eye, well, that's 2. 3, look out, because you got a trend going. It's like that guy they interviewed on NPR one time who had been mugged something like 37 times.
Whoa.
And they got a bunch of prisoners who were in jail for mugging, and they had them look at videos of people walking and said, which ones would you mug? And they were pretty much in agreement at being able to pick out the right one to mug. And it was always kind of like disjointed, hopeless, dejected body language, where the person was clearly occupied with something a million miles away. When suddenly you stick a knife under their neck and say, could I please have your purse?
Mhm.
They're much more agreeable with that if you pick the right person.
Yeah.
But they didn't pick some guy coming out of the gym carrying a 300-pound gym bag or something. It was based on body language. And so it shows up in all sorts of places in our being when we are glitched up about whatever the issue is. It could be anger we're glitched up about. We either withhold it and it makes us sick and headachy, or we express it too much and get ourselves in social trouble. There could be sadness issues. You might be still in grief. I swear my mother stayed in grief about my father's death, and she managed it by smoking 2 or 3 packs of Marlboros a day. That was her way of dealing with grief until finally that killed her. And so, but I don't think she ever dealt with the grief, and that's such a sad thing to me that
Mhm.
people, well, it's what addictions are all about. People are trying to trade in the feelings that come with addictions, the shame and the guilt and the occasionally bits of euphoria. They'll trade that in for having an authentic experience of life. And I think I've probably worked with something like 1,800 different addicts over the years of different substances, alcohol and drugs and tobacco, and lately sugar. Now people are beginning to see
Yes.
sugar as an addiction, which I will totally tell them it is. It's
Yes.
a
You
big deal
know, yeah.
addiction too. And just speaking clinically, I've had an easier time getting people to give up heroin and stay off heroin than I have getting them to give up and stay off sugar.
Wow.
Even though they know that the over sugar consumption is either hurting them diabetically or, adding to their obesity woes. But, it's a really insidious addiction because our cells so much run on sugar, and so
Mhm.
it's very addictive to put something in that immediately meets those cellular needs.
Yeah. There are so many things that you said in so many directions that I want to go in, but going back to you telling your students, your patients will tell you. And then you said that you had 3 patients and clients in a row that were talking about their father. Going to the guy that got robbed 38 times. Many people who experience these more negative experiences multiple times, they blame it on the world. Right? It's like the world is doing me wrong. Why me? And it's hard to shift the perspective and see it as it's trying to teach you something. It's just a mirror for things that have to be worked through in your own life and your own existence. How do you even start to help people who are so bottled up in the world is doing them wrong, getting the hammer, hammer, hammer? To kind of soften and see, well, maybe there's a learning experience here for you and it's just direction.
Yeah, well, it's really a key point. It's getting people to look inside
Uh,
in a way that has genuine wonder and curiosity instead of criticism.
mhm.
Genuine wonder and curiosity. Well, if you can't see it from here, but there's a big poster over here that says wonder on it, because in my view, wonder is the great underused human superpower. Because a moment of genuine wonder where you let go of thinking you're right or let go of thinking now that's one of the big problems in life, is thinking we know something that we don't really know.
Mhm.
And it seals off that possibility of learning. But what I get people to do is I say, okay, just pause for a minute and do something fresh. Um, Wonder with me about what you're going to have for lunch tomorrow. And they'll say, well, I don't know. I'll say, great, just wonder about it with me. And then I'll say, in that same method, wonder about, what is my anger really about? Or,
Mhm.
what am I really grieving about?
Mhm.
Or, genuine wonder questions. See, wonder questions.
Love
If
wonder.
you can come into yourself with a wonder question, it shows that you're totally open to learning from reality, from truth. And your body is just a successive memory system from remembering the moments of truth and
Mhm.
that have happened to you in your life.
Mhm.
Interestingly enough, I used to study sometimes with a famous osteopath named Dr. Viola Fryman, who practiced in La Jolla, California for much of her life.
Love
But
the whole.
she worked with newborns and babies who were having problems with colic or something like that. And she would do this kind of body magic with them by working with their craniosacral system and that kind of thing. And you'd see this baby that had been crying for 6 weeks suddenly relax, and because she did something internally that was driving the problem. And many people try to fix problems externally, by making the baby stop crying without fixing the underlying problem that's causing the constant misery and colickiness. And I'll tell you, if you want to see a face of relief, sometimes watch a mother who's been holding a crying baby for 6 weeks have that baby stop crying and go into a nice peaceful sleep. That's a moment I treasure a lot in my life. But what I'm getting at here is that we need to begin to benignly get under the surface of what we think we know, because then because with that wonder, it opens up a treasure trove of memory and creativity and insight. I mean, everybody's a genius psychologist if they'll just give themselves 10 seconds of wondering, why do I continue to get angry at my boss? In genuine wonder. That's a miracle to me that it works so fast and so beautifully so much of the time. But, you know, who was it? E. Cummings, one of our great poets, said it's always the beautiful question that gets the beautiful answer. So if you can ask yourself a beautiful question, you're gonna get a beautiful answer.
It's incredible. My life changed when I started going inward and turning the mirror inside, and also giving the love that I gave so freely to others to myself. All of the things that you have said so far, it's like I wish we taught this in schools. And it truly is life changing. And when you can give yourself the space, like for me, for instance, I was the old soul as a child. And I was the one who always helped people. And I was this softer being. But I had real trauma and real things that I went through. And as an adult, I didn't know this, but I had so much anger inside that I had suppressed, and it masked kind of as sadness. Like I would never allow myself to feel anger until one day I was sitting in my office and I was just writing down. I just like allowed myself, I gave myself the space and the openness and the wonder to see what would come out. And man, I wrote some shit that it was so liberating. I mean, it was horrifying to see on paper what I was so angry at, whether it was deaths or my family or but for the first time in my life, I allowed myself to feel that. And I allowed myself to let it flow through me and instead of getting stuck in me. And that was a wonderful experience. And I feel like sometimes you have to go through the shit and feel the stuff that you don't want to feel or that you're scared to feel because it's just trying to pass through you. It's just trying to release.
I think that one thing that you mentioned that I really want to highlight, and that is that we often use one feeling and all the stuff that goes with it to cover up a more tender, deep thing. Like in lots of ways, it's easier to deal with anger stuff than it is to deal with grief stuff and fear stuff, because anger has so much drama with it and all of
Yeah.
that. But I think that, there's a good reason that feelings are sort of layered up in our bodies. Like a lot of the anger you get up in your shoulders and back of your neck and cause headaches if you constrict and hold on to your anger, because human beings have been using those areas to express their anger for millions of years. And who are we to argue with that? In this time of life, you get told to stuff your feelings a lot of times
Yeah.
growing up. And
Yeah.
so, same thing with grief and fear, though. There's a lot of folks, including me, I was one of them that used my anger to protect myself, to keep from really honoring and acknowledging the deep grief I was carrying around. And, I think I'd begun to soak it up internally before I was even born.
Mhm.
I think that if we can soak up nutrition through the bloodstream, we can easily
Yeah.
soak up emotion,
Yeah.
at
And the
the
state
same
of your
time.
mother
So,
and yeah, all of the
I,
energy around.
yeah,
Absolutely.
and that energy, of course, led to my mother's thing about not being able to produce those hormones, and then that led to my obesity and all of that. So, finally, the great thing about my life and your life to celebrate is that somewhere along the line, we kind of caught on to our
We
game and
did.
said, "Wait a minute, I don't want to play that game anymore." I
No,
don't want to
let's get
play."
off this hamster wheel.
Yeah, I don't want to be the happy 55-year-old bachelor fat guy.
I want to be the conscious, loving, yeah.
Yeah, I want to be the guy that walks out on the stage on Oprah, wearing the Armani suit and
And listen, hey, it
yeah,
happened. You
yeah,
made it happen. You created it. And that's the perfect, I know that we're limited on time, but it's the perfect segue. You write, and I do love this conscious living book. You write, and I'm going to read this really quickly. If you look back over your life, you will find that you keep getting certain lessons repeated over and over until you learn them. The same thing is true for other seekers and has been for thousands of years. Certain lessons are so profound and so tough to master that we get stuck on one and spend an entire lifetime butting our heads against it. As I have worked with people in my career and as I have studied the great teachers of conscious living of the past few thousand years, I realize that we all need to learn 5 foundation lessons of living. If we learn them, life works. If we don't, it doesn't. These are the required lessons of conscious living. Everybody gets the same challenging lessons, usually every day, and we define our lives by whether we resist learning them or embrace the challenge with passion and willingness. Unfortunately, many people wait until the death rattle is gurgling in their throats before they wake up, with an ultimate gulp to the same lesson that was first presented to them on the front end of life. Boom. It is so true. And I saw it as a young child. And I'm still so curious about you seeing energy, your cardboard box with problems on it. I mean, we would have been friends if we were of the same time. But I really want to dive into these 5 cardinal rules and lessons that you've beautifully outlined for everyone in conscious living. Can we start with the first? Feel
good.
all your feelings deeply.
Yes. Well, boy, how long did it take me to learn that? How long did it take you to learn? Uh, I was, I, I think I was maybe into my 30s before I really actually began to be able to let myself feel things, instead of getting angry, just letting myself feel it and letting myself feel my grief. And I remember one time with anger, I was just getting in touch with my anger, and I was sitting at a traffic light and I'd forgotten my window was rolled down. And I was rolling my shoulders and I was waiting for the light to change, and I'm just going, and I was screaming and yelling and everything like that. And suddenly I kind of, you know, settled back down, and I was still waiting for the light to change. And I look over to my left, and there's these people in a pickup truck, and they're looking down in the window like this, and I could see genuine looks of fright on their faces, like, do we need to be calling somebody to come get this person? So, um, anyway, learning how to let yourself simply experience them, it's and same way with fear. I mean, instead of acting out your anxiety, letting yourself feel it. That was so important to me in losing all that weight, because I realized that a good bit of my eating was just to make those feelings go away. And it's funny, I didn't even realize it was totally unconscious. It's like I don't know if it was in this book, but I had a client who was in his mid 30s, and he came in his first session, he gave me the greatest one liner. Here's what he said basically. He said, since I was a teenager, I've been in, I think it was like 17 different relationships where they've suddenly ended, or the woman has dumped me, or she'll just disappear, or something weird will happen. And he said, it's been happening since, I was, 17 years older than me. And he said, here's the one liner. He said, I'm beginning to wonder if it has something to do with me. My goodness. I mean, imagine if you'd walked to work 17 times and had a brick fall on your head on that street, what are the chances that you walk on that street and keep walking on that street and not realize, oh, I've got a pattern going here. But I use that story to just illustrate how amazing a grip those old patterns, because if you say to the person, hey, you've got a pattern here, I can tell you from 20,000 experiences that they don't always say, wow, thank you for pointing it out.
Yeah.
They say something like, that's not a pattern.
Yeah,
That's
that's not
just
true.
how life has to be,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know? And so,
Defensiveness. Yeah.
yeah, getting that moment of reflection, that
Mm.
moment of, I wonder if this has something to do with me. I fervently hope that your viewers and listeners, when they go home from this, are doubly, triply, quadruply committed to letting themselves simply feel things as a way of awakening body intelligence. And, it's like by the time we're in kindergarten, we can usually point to a place in our body and say, I have to go to the bathroom, teacher. And boom, it gets instant action. But we're not taught to come to the teacher and say, I feel sad. That's
I
interesting, isn't
know.
it?
Yeah.
That one set of body symptoms is okay. But if you go and say, I feel butterflies in my stomach, what's the teacher going to say? If it's one of the
Great. Go
teaching
sit down.
reframes, it's take 3 deep breaths and change your body position, acknowledge those feelings. But that's often, in fact, I realize I'm going on a bit of a rant here, but really, one of the big problems is advertising itself, because from the time we're listening to the radio, watching television, listening to things and all of that, we're getting a message of, hey, are you feeling these body symptoms? Well, this will
Take
fix it
this.
or make
Yeah.
it better. That it's insidious in a way. It affects our insides, in other words, because we're hearing these messages frequently. And, like I admire this man so much, Ken Hecht, who's a movie producer. He was 123 pounds overweight. And one Saturday night, lonely by himself, weighing 323 pounds, he found himself at the refrigerator about to eat those feelings. And all of a sudden he realized, wait a minute, instead of feeding those feelings, let me simply feel them and see what happens. And he started feeling that loneliness and feeling that fear and feeling that what he had mistaken was gnawing hunger. He thought it was gnawing hunger, but it was the gnawing pain of loneliness. He'd just mistaken it. And so when he started actually letting himself feel those feelings, everything changed. And suddenly he's down, not suddenly, but within a year and a half, he's down at 200 pounds. But he looks like a ballerina compared to weighing 300 pounds, And oh man, I've seen so many of those kind of miracles, including experiencing my own, that I just, for a long time, I did, I taught weight loss and that kind of thing in my classes and did video programs on weight loss and things because I was well known for it. Now I think it's a bigger problem than that. Fat is just one of the ways it shows up. It's this problem of what the Greeks called alexithymia 2,500 years ago. Alexithymia is their word for not being able to feel your feelings. Wow. 2,500 years ago, the Greeks had a name for it. They knew about that problem. And so it's that lack of willingness to let ourselves feel something. Like I watched my mother thousands of times light up an unfiltered Camel cigarette. And later on in life, I just knew that was because she's trying to get away from that grief. And it just never works. And she was never able to kick the addiction until the last few months of her life. And I feel a great deal of sadness about that to this day, that she missed out on a lot of, like her granddaughter's life, my daughter's life, and those kinds of things because of that tendency to go for the cigarette instead of body intelligence.
Mhm. I have that in my own parents as well.
Oh,
And for the first half of my existence, I tried so hard to help and to change and to control and to be the best that I could be so they could stop until I realized it's not it's not my job, and their it's their healing, it's their journey, and to have compassion and give love and all of that stuff, but to have that boundary of it's not my job to do their work for them, which
I'll tell you, actually, I'm feeling some tears tugging at my eyes just hearing you say that because I'm just remembering how much energy I put into that
so
as a
much,
kid. I mean, just
so much.
I feel my belly tightening just thinking of the amount of energy I tried to put into trying to get people to kick their addictions. And it's just, I wish somebody had whispered in my ear when I was in kindergarten,
Mm.
hey,
Well,
kid,
somebody did.
it's not, somebody did.
About something else, but
I wish
sorry, go ahead.
somebody in my
Hey, kid.
family had whispered that to me and said, hey, that's not your job.
Mm.
That's somebody else's job.
I I am with you on a deep, deep level. Okay, number 2, seek your true self.
Say it again.
Seek your true self. Cardinal rule number 2 for
Seek
living.
your truth. Okay. Well, it's funny that when you said seek, I was also hearing in my ear, speak your truth.
Mm,
Um, like
that's important.
one of my favorite quotations is from one of the apocryphal gospels, the Gospel of Thomas. And it says, if you bring forth what is within you, what is within you will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what is within you will destroy you. In
Yeah.
other words, if you
Wow.
leave your potential untapped,
Yes.
wow, what a powerful thing.
Wow.
And
Yes.
it didn't, I'm sad to say that it didn't make it into the official Bible because of things like that. That's pretty radical stuff.
Yeah.
Also in the gospel, I think it's either Thomas or the Acts of John or something like that. Uh, Jesus leads a round dance, and that also didn't make it. I mean, into the official Bible because I don't think they wanted to have Jesus as portrayed as a dance therapist,
Mhm.
and which I think would have been great.
That'd been awesome.
My wife is a dance therapist, and I know she would have appreciated that.
I do want to say this before we continue on Seek Your True Self, and I am conscious of our time. I too, when I was young, would go to church. My parents, I grew up Catholic, and we would go to church, and I would just see. You had the vision, I would feel things. And I was just like, this is just a check off, a to do thing. It's like, check, I went to church, but I'm going to be the exact same human being when I walk out those doors as when I walked in. And it just did not resonate with me. I was like, there's something off here. And that that was my introduction to church and the religion at a very young age. But there are everything that we've experienced, all of your beautiful synchronicities and downloads and things that to me is like, whoa, whoa.
Yeah. Well, I think that religion, we often overlook what religion is for. And I came down kind of anti church growing up because I had to go to church and it was like one of those boxes we checked.
Yeah.
And I knew basically that about 90% of the people wouldn't have voluntarily come, I don't think. And not that they were secular pagans or anything like that. They just didn't want to sit and be bored silly for an hour and have to sing songs that weren't about what life is all about. I kept waiting for those subjects to be brought up, but they were never brought up. Like I wanted to find out, why does X member of my family go to church and then be screaming at their kids for an hour over dinner? Those kind of questions
That's
puzzled the
what I
heck
had.
out of
Yeah.
me. It's
Yes.
like my granddad, he was a very secular, unreligious guy. My grandmother was quite religious and went to church and everything, and he would never go to church with her. And I hope this family story is true, but if it's not, it ought to be. He apparently asked her she asked him one day why he wouldn't go to church with her. And he said, well, I haven't seen any improvement yet. You can imagine that didn't get him
Oh
fed
my
his
God.
favorite Sunday dinner that week.
That is hilarious.
My grandparents were married 63 years, but according to my mother, I wasn't there for all of them, but according to my mother, they weren't speaking to each other for 59 and a half of those years.
That is funny.
But
But okay, so
seeking your truth.
yes.
See, I think that we have this, if you're hiding the truth in some way for the best possible reasons, let's say you hid your anger as a child because you knew that it wouldn't
Mhm.
get you any goodies, it got you in trouble. And so and so gradually we have a set of defenses that mount up. But here's the thing, that stuff won't let you alone.
Mhm.
If you've got
It's
anger
knocking.
issues, you'll keep getting bugged by headache or back pain or neck pain or something because anger just shows up in our bodies the same way it shows up in a cat or a dog. It rises the hackles. We don't happen to have much hair back there, but that's the hackles of our body that rise up, our trapezius muscles and all that get ready to fight. And same thing down in our chest and belly. Hidden grief will out itself in some fashion. It'll keep showing up in your relationships. And same thing with fear. Your anxiety will keep showing up. But here's the thing, that all of those things are only dealt with by going inside in a very benign, wondering way.
Yeah.
You can't criticize them out of your body. You've got to go, what's causing the problem in my relationships? And you've got to take honesty. You've got to be honest about that. You've got to keep seeking that truth inside. And I'll tell you, I've been around the world now, 2.5 million frequent flyer miles and 30 some times around the world. This is a big problem that we have on planet Earth. It's that so many people are unhappy because they can't express their potential. They
Yes.
can't, because of the setup, whatever the setup is. I talked to this kid in Africa that's, like one of 59 children. And how do you spend quality time with your dad in a situation where 58 people are in front of you? Well, the question is, he didn't, he had to spend his time playing in a ditch and trying to amuse himself. And so all of those kind of things, though, stem off of this seeking your internal truth, because what it gets down to is that at its very best, life is an expression of your genius, of what you are really here to do, of what you're really here to express, what you most love to do, and what your biggest contribution is. And that's life at its best. And I've seen that close up and personal now for half my life and experienced it in my own life. If we can commit ourselves to bringing forth that genius and bringing forth who we truly are, that has value in the world. That affects our relationships. That it can even lead to a full-time job over the past 50 years for me. Once I discovered this, I couldn't hold on to it. I had to start writing books about it, and I had to start, showing up on Oprah and talking about it and those kind of things. And I'm glad I did. I wouldn't want to go back to that lifestyle now because I'm 80 years old and I wouldn't want to be running to catch airplanes for 15, 20 years of my life. But I'm glad I did it because I wish I'd had the map that I laid out. I lay out a map for people, and I wish I'd had that as growing up, and I wish I'd had that as a young seeker, but I didn't, and I'm sort of glad I didn't because I had to invent it myself and had to visit the territory myself. But now you can save yourself a lot of trouble by my map and other people like me that write deep books about things like this. Well, those are, you know, there's always 5% of every herd that goes over on the horizon and looks for new grazing territory and looks for what's over the next hill. Of course, you run the risk of getting eaten over there, but that's where the good stuff is. And
Yeah.
I'm delighted to be among that 5% of the animals that goes over to graze somewhere on the edge.
And the world is immensely better for it. So thank you. Okay, really quickly, we have 5 minutes. Let go of the uncontrollable. I feel like this is such a big one.
Oh, yes. Well, if you go back, I was lucky enough to be introduced to the philosopher Epictetus, who, if you don't read anything else this month, go read The Art of Living translation of Epictetus. Um, Epictetus was a philosopher and he was so wise, but he did not like to write things down. And so his students would gather around and write down little things he said, and then they assembled them into this book. But the number one thing he said, if you want to be happy, understand this one thing. There are some things in life you can control, and some things in life you cannot control. And study those things and get good at letting go of trying to control the uncontrollable. Because if you sit around trying to control the past by thinking about all the wrongs that you did to yourself, or that, that people did to you and now you're
Yeah.
doing to yourself, if you sit around and think about that, well, that takes up the exact amount of time that it takes to let go of that and experience something brand new. But a lot of people, like if you really study your thought processes humbly and honestly early on, you'll notice that a lot of them are about the past and a lot of them, though, are about the future,
Future.
trying to manage the future, trying to predict a successful future, trying to avoid a painful future. They're out there in the future about something you have no control over.
Mhm.
Oh boy, don't get me started on this subject. We'll be here for the next hour, and I
Well, you
can't be
can.
here for the next hour. I got something else that starts in 3 minutes. But
Uh,
let me just um, let my tendency to rant stop there and just urgently apply and implore people to study carefully how you're using your thoughts. Are you using them on things that are outside of your control? And I want people to have the delicious experience of letting go, of trying to control, like letting go of trying to control what people feel about you.
Yeah. It's so liberating. And you gain
Yeah,
all of your energy back to create the life that you desire. And by design, in this moment, when you pull all of that energy, worrying about the past, focusing on the future, and you come back to this moment in the present.
yeah. What's number four? I'm dying to know.
We are all made of the same thing. And then five is life is fullest when we're most true to ourselves.
Say the
And
last one again.
life is fullest when we are most true to ourselves.
Oh, okay,
And
good.
I think this is what we've been talking about the entire conversation, both of these things, that we're all the same. We have the same hands, we have the soul, we're all the same and we're made of the same stuff,
Exactly.
come from the
I mean,
same source.
if you get down to the basic cellular level, there's carbon that's scattered everywhere else in the universe. There's nitrogen way everywhere. There's oxygen. You can prove that to yourself. And there's nitrogen. And we're made up of these fabulous chemical elements that are always in ancient Sanskrit. The word lila means play. And wow, do we play? Hey, my wife has got to get in
I
here
I
and
see
do
that.
a class here in 1 minute. And
Gay,
I
thank
don't
you
want to get beat
so
about the head
much.
and shoulders with a noodle or anything. So at lunchtime,
I'm not going to say goodbye. I'll say I'll see you again at some point. Our paths, I'm sure, will cross. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the beautiful work that you do in the world. And thank you.
come see us outside out here in our part of paradise sometime.
Yeah. Take care. While we could have spoken for hours, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Gay as much as I did. His wisdom is such a reminder that we all have the ability to heal, to open, and to live more consciously. If you'd like to go deeper, you can find Conscious Living and Gay's other books wherever you buy books. And if this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to subscribe to Your Future Self so you never miss conversations like this. We create this space with you in mind, and it means so much to know it's reaching you. Most of all, I hope this reminds you not to wait. Life is always offering you the chance to listen, to heal, and to choose differently. Your future self is already calling. The question is, are you willing to answer?